Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Chat with Coach Kat. Today's episode is a part of the Awesome Entrepreneur Guest Special Edition. We will be talking all about the entrepreneurial journeys, the highs, the lows, the path, the experiences, the lessons, and so much more. I'm excited to get to share with you the wisdom these great souls have acquired over the years. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to today's guest, Christy Holt. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your expertise, and where you're coming from, and then we will dive into some more questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation and share a little bit of my story with you and your audience. I call myself the happiness hussy, and that is because I'm on a mission to spread happiness all across the world. And I do that in a few different ways. So number one, I'm a podcast host. I have a podcast called Create Your Happy, and that is all inspiration for conscious women. In fact, I have also created a platform for many women to share their stories as well, because I think the more that we can share our stories, the more other people will feel themselves in those stories. And it gives us a kind of different permission to fully step into the authentic being that we are. Now, as well as the podcast, I am also a published author, and I have a couple of books out, working very hard on the next book, which I'm very excited about. And the first book is called Unstuck for Women. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more about why I wrote this a little later in the conversation, but for now, I'll just say that this book was born of a time where I was really stuck in my previous relationship, and I could not see a way out. Now, Unstuck for Women was my solution to people, to help people who are feeling really stuck, not necessarily in their relationships, but that was my story. So I definitely wanted to share that. I am also a mentor, and I love helping people to really up-level their relationships. And it all starts with the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Amen to that. Beautifully said. And I can't wait to hear all about the book. And I know when you and I, just right before we started recording, we talked a little bit about like your most biggest maybe moment where you had your breakthrough. Yeah. So do you want to start with that? And then we'll kind of look at your journey and how you got to that point.
Absolutely. Honestly, I tell this story a lot, and it sort of creates the picture. I don't know if y'all have been driving home, but your mind is somewhere else. You arrive home, but you don't actually remember the drive. You don't remember if you stopped at the red lights or the stop signs. You assume you probably did because, hey, you're safe at home, but you can't really remember. And that is sort of what my life was like not too long ago. And so I came to this moment where it was like, holy shit, how did I get here? I really didn't remember all of the steps that got me to the place. All I knew was that I was terribly unhappy and felt completely helpless to change anything. Fortunately, I had this sort of aha moment that was like, I'm the common denominator in every last one of my problems. And at first I was like, oh shit, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Hello, channeling Taylor Swift. I'm the problem. It's me. And then simultaneously, I recognized that I was also the sole solution. So it was up to me to move forward and do things differently. And so that's really where this next piece of my journey really began. I've always been sort of a lover of learning, a lover of growing, a lover of personal development. I love to read about these topics, but this was the pivotal moment where shit started to really make sense. And I really started to embody all of the things that I had been learning. And I realized in that moment that I had been staying for my kids in this marriage that was making me rather unhappy. And honestly, it just wasn't a good fit. I had been staying because I thought that that's what my kids needed, a safe, stable home, right? But I realized in that sort of holy shit moment, they don't need me to buffer this and create this pretend vision of what could be a perfect, unquote, perfect, not perfect family. They needed me to actually step up and take action that showed them the difference, right? Kids don't really listen. This is what I've discovered. They're not listening so much to what you're saying, but they are observing the actions that you're taking. And so I needed to step up. I needed to choose me, and I needed to do the things that were going to make me happy. Now, not to the detriment of anyone else. Like, let's not get carried away here. But I think that this is an important thing to touch on, because so many people in that situation are too afraid to do something for themselves. We have been conditioned for freaking ever to believe that we are supposed to be the good girl, that caring for yourself is selfish, all of these things that keep us really stuck in people pleasing mode, really, because we're not doing it for us. We're caring for everyone else. We're there being the martyr. I call that being just a mom, or call it just a momitis, which is sort of like this idea that like you've become a mom and now you've forgotten everything else that you ever were. And, ultimately it's up to us to decide how do we want to create our life. And this is shifting out of that autopilot driving home without thinking into consciously choosing. Now, it's not about the destination either. So let's remember that it's ultimately about the journey, but we're just going to want to focus on choosing the next step, because that's what keeps us moving towards that end destination. And let's be honest, there's no real end destination, because as you get closer, you realize there are more destinations available for you.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's so many key points that I took away from what you said, and I just wanted to touch on a few. And one of them is, that whole being the good girl mentality, and how many women struggle because they're stuck in that, and they keep putting up with bad behavior, mental and physical, and all kinds of abuse. And just like ultimately the abuse that they themselves, inflict on themselves, because, at the end of the day, when you feel miserable, that is some sort of punishment.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you touched on was, the example that we set for our children. We think that if we tell them, oh, you should stick up for yourself, you should do what's good for you, but then we go and mimic the opposite, which one are they going to follow, right?
Definitely the one we're doing, not the one we're saying, right?
It's just like, again, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, because I am a mom too. I'm a single mom. I walked away from a marriage that just almost killed me. And I can like totally relate with what you said. And at some point you have to say, it's either me or like you. And at the end, I had to choose me, because I was literally physically sick. I got so anxious I didn't leave the house for a whole year because of the trauma that, and I could not show that to my kid. I really couldn't. So I walked away. So I know what that's like. It wasn't easy, right?
It's the hardest decision ever. Honestly, it's literally the most difficult decision that I have ever made. And it's ridiculous, because essentially what I'm doing was choosing me in a world where we've been taught that that's terrible and wrong and selfish.
Exactly.
That overcoming that belief that actually isn't true. You actually totally deserve to choose you. And if you won't choose you, how can you expect anyone else to?
And the other thing I want to ask, and I'm curious, like you have the book right behind you, and I'm like keep staring at it, and it says Unstuck. I wonder, do you associate that like getting unstuck with waking up to like coming to Jesus kind of moment?
Sure, yeah. A good old Jesus take the wheel kind of moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is absolutely, there's different definitions, I think, of a lot of these things, right? Like of transcendence or awakening or all of these things. To me, what I actually think an awakening is, or even a spiritual awakening, is actually coming to realize your wholeness and the power that comes along with recognizing that you are already a whole ass human, magnificent, divine, whole human, and that there's nothing missing from you. You don't need to, this is something I speak about often, because we don't actually want to go look for someone to complete us. That relationship myth has got to go. That's total BS. What we need is actually to seek out those people in relationship that completely accept us. And that is a complete change on the way many of us have been taught to look at relationships. And to add on a little more to my story, about the hot minute that I actually ended up getting divorced from my ex-husband and the father of my children, I met the most incredible human. Now, when I came to this relationship, I was whole. I wasn't trying to change him. I wasn't trying to find someone who would help fix me or heal me or fill gaps in my life. I was actually completely content and happy with myself. And in fact, I was actually uninterested in getting
Yeah.
into another relationship. I was done with all of that nonsense. And so a few things that I really learned from, entering a relationship when I actually didn't want one are actually really pivotal teachings as far as building solid relationship foundations. Number one is like coming whole, right? Coming to the relationship without expectations. Now, you can have standards. Not everyone is a fit for you. This isn't about that. And you should hold personal boundaries. That's a huge one. And part of this process really helped me to learn how to communicate clear boundaries and to actually respect them, both for myself to respect my own boundaries and also to hold other people to respect my boundaries. And that means following through on said consequences. I think boundaries is a relatively new topic in the last couple of decades. So a lot of people maybe are unclear. I know some people maybe view boundaries as a wall to keep people out, as a purely protective measure.
Yeah.
I don't view them that way. I actually view them as an invitation to go into a deeper connection if done right. And so I actually have a course that teaches about boundaries and how to communicate them and how to figure out what your boundaries are, because a lot of us, we don't know. And sometimes we still don't know until they're crossed and we're like, oh yeah, that's not okay. And so learning to observe that, incorporate that moving forward, crossed a boundary once, shame on me. I mean, not really, shame on you, but like not really, because you crossed it. And now I'm just going to learn. I'm going to learn that that didn't work for me. And so next time there's going to be something different in place so that I can continue to thrive too. Because ultimately, this is what it's about. It's about thriving in relationship together and making relationships that work for both parties. And truly, it's not about what you can get from the other person. It's ultimately about what you can give and the growth that you will experience together. So I learned so many things during that time, ultimately about communication, about building strong foundations. And that is absolutely my passion, to share all of those things that I learned, both from the challenging relationship that I was in previously and contrasted by the absolutely incredible relationship that I am in now. We are parenting 4 teenage boys. So if you know how much stress that is.
I only have one.
We don't fight. We don't argue. We're on the same team. And so what I really wish to express to the world is that those sort of healthy relationships that you maybe don't think exist or aren't possible for you, they exist. They're out there. There are other humans just waiting for you, but you've got to come to the relationship whole. And so the work begins within you.
I love that. And I just kind of want to transition a little bit into, how did you become a business owner and used all of these lessons? Obviously, you're teaching them, but when did you decide to become a business owner? And when did you, how did you think, oh my gosh, okay, this is going to be valuable information for others to, learn from me. They don't have to take the hard road. And obviously, we do want to share some of your, struggles, because we know that entrepreneurship and coaching and all of that is not a straight road. And we would love, the audience would probably love to learn a little bit about, your path.
Yeah. Well, as with most people, my path has been a windy one. I dipped my toe into the entrepreneurial world when I was 14 years old, and I started my first business as a piano teacher. So as you can now see, I have been a teacher at heart for a very, very long time. I still teach piano. I also then went on to obtain a business degree and became a professional accountant, which now, if you've been listening to this conversation, you might be thinking, what? Because that maybe isn't adding up at all with my personality. So no surprise, on the first week on the job, we did some sort of personality assessment, and one of these things was not like the other. It was me. I was the odd man out. I was over in the nurturing and loving and teaching and helping kind of category, where everyone else was strictly in that analytical, logical thinking brain. And I knew right away, I was like, okay, this is going to get interesting. So fast forward to the point a number of years later, when I had my first child, I'm at home, I'm holding my baby. I don't know how I could possibly leave this precious being to return to work. And the universe stepped in, give me a good old slap upside the face. And I actually got let go from my position while I was on mat leave. Now, initially that was about my response too. It was like,
Oh,
what the hell just happened here? But given how badly I wanted to stay home with my child, it was absolutely a blessing in disguise, because I also really sort of in that few months of being home with my child really reassessed my life purpose and my goals and what I really wanted to create. And that job was not it. I didn't fit in the mold. The things that I excelled at doing, which were teaching and mentoring and those kind of things, frankly, just weren't valuable in a billable hours sort of situation. And so I'm very grateful, because while I had the initial shock of being let go, they had no just cause really. And so I got a nice severance package and I got to stay home with my baby. So that was big twist number one. I'm actually grateful for it because I actually became an accountant to make my parents happy. So that was not for me in the first place. So people pleaser, perfectionist, yeah, that played out in a huge kind of way. Then as my kids grew up, I did some teaching because I still loved the teaching. I was teaching some accounting and teaching a few other things. But when my kids were old enough to all be in school full time, I had some spare time on my hands. And so I thought, okay, well, what do I do now? I knew what I didn't want to do. I did not want to return to the accounting world. That was like, oh, boring. And so I decided to follow another one of my passions, which was fitness and nutrition. And so I became a personal trainer. I got a nutrition coaching certification, and I dove all the way into helping people with their health. And what I discovered during this process was that that's just a tiny piece of said whole ass human. And although one tiny piece can have a big ripple effect, there was a lot of mindset that really went along with the health coaching side. And that was where my passion really was. It wasn't on the reps or the perfect meal plan, which, don't even talk to me about diet culture. I don't want to go there. We don't have time for that conversation. But it's just a small piece. Yeah, maybe another time. It's a small piece of the big human puzzle. And I really wanted to help people just on a bit of a grander scale. So enter the pandemic, which happened at, I think, about the right timing, because it really took a lot of what I had been working on building with this fitness business and kind of wiped it out. So again, I'm sitting with this like, okay, well, that's interesting. I pivoted as much as I possibly could, given the circumstances. And then I still had all this space. And I was like, okay, well, I have some space. I might as well use it. And so I began to really learn and grow and explore and, build my toolbox of resources and techniques that can help me to process and move through challenging times, and really to reflect back on those lessons that I had learned and really get to understand, not from like this is what happened to me, but like, okay, how did I make this happen? So that I could share that with other people so that they too can get unstuck, so that they too can recognize the divine miracle that they are walking here on this earth. Like, is anybody else not mind blown by the fact that we wake up every day, the sun comes up and we go out, we get in our little cars, we drive around, or we're on the internet like you and I are on Zoom chat. It doesn't matter where in the world we are. We're able to connect with people. We're out, like, I just is mind blowing to me. I can think of so many things I'm immensely grateful for in every moment. Like, it's just incredible. So when we start to really recognize how incredible it all really is, and to operate from that space, now we're standing in our power. Now we're not letting other people, take away our power. They can't take away our power. That's an illusion, but we can definitely feel like we've given it away. And so this is you standing in your power, really choosing consciously the life that you wish to create.
Powerful stuff. I mean, One of the things that I've witnessed with all of the guests that I've interviewed and in my story as well, and I just really want to honor it, is this evolution that we have. It's oftentimes we think that, okay, this is it. I found my place, and then something else happened, and then you keep evolving. And I think it's really, really important not to judge, right? Because when you're in that space, you're like, again, I must not be doing something right, but it is a part of, like, if something is calling you to become bigger, to let go of more limitations, to try even more things, to see what else you're capable of. And that's what I'm hearing in your story. And it's really interesting because of what happens and I heard this just recently too in another interview, is like, I dreamt about having my business, but I was scared to let go. And then, COVID happened and I got fired.
Yeah. Like, well
And
then.
I do really believe that COVID served as an, like, awakening. I know I use that word, but I really do believe that it served as an awakening for a lot of people. We were all in this deep sleep.
Yeah.
We were acting on autopilot for the longest time, and I do believe that once that kind of forced us to stay home and be with ourselves, we had to do a lot of like self-reflecting,
Yep.
evaluating what we're doing with our lives and all of that. So I just really, really love what you're sharing because it's super, super powerful. And just I want to thank you first and foremost for being open and telling your story. And I just really hope that when people hear your story, they get encouraged to keep on going, to understand that no matter what point you reach, even
Yeah.
though you feel stuck, you can get unstuck, right?
It's all temporary ultimately. And I'll tell you what, the catalyst is you. Okay. And here are some special components that you need to have so that you can move forward. Number one, you're going to take radical responsibility for you because you're the only person that you can change. You can waste your breath all day long. Trust me, I tried. Girl, I tried so
Oh, me
hard.
too.
Oh boy. It did not budge a thing. The only person you can change is yourself. So when I shifted from complaining and blaming and venting and blah, 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 and waiting, all the nonsense, focused not on myself, but on everything else around me, when I shifted to focus on myself and what I could do, that's when things truly began to change. And I know that that can be really hard when you're in it because it feels like you're covered in a huge pile of shit and it's hard to see your way out. But the truth is, you're the only one who can do it. So taking radical responsibility. Part two, extra equally, or if not extra important, is self-compassion. You are not going to beat yourself up or guilt or shame yourself out of a shitty place. That we are under some kind of delusion that that actually works. And we actually have been conditioned to believe that if we don't shame ourselves or beat ourselves up or get upset with ourselves for making mistakes, that we'll lose all motivation and become
Motivation,
completely
right? Um,
complacent and selfish. And it's
Backwards.
not true. It's not. So giving yourself some compassion, which just means, hey, I see you. Well, I have some room to grow. I made a mistake. I'm human. I strongly believe that we're all doing the best that we can given the resources and understanding that we have, yourself included. So give yourself that moment of compassion. It is actually what will encourage you to try again, and to try things differently. Beating yourself up just literally doesn't work. But I have heard time and time again, people trying to use those strategies. I think we must be taught them in school by the educational system or something. I don't know. I'm not pointing fingers, but that conditioning is really strong. And so it's actually not selfish to take care of yourself. It's actually really crucial.
Yeah, and even watching the words, like earlier when you said, and I really love that you kind of like caught yourself while saying it. But oftentimes it is so automatic that we say it or we think it anyway. When you said, if you cross the boundary, it's like shame on me, then shame on you, and all of that. And we think that way. We
Yeah.
really do think that way. And it's just like, okay, hold on, what just happened? How can I navigate it differently? How can I not be in the situation again? Those are different options, right? And when you love yourself, you come from that place. And in business, I found that that's like one of the biggest things people don't
Hmm.
do.
Yeah.
but is the quickest elevator to success. Because the
Yeah.
less you punish yourself or shame yourself or are hard on yourself, the easier it is to actually, get back into the momentum and do more things and become more creative and, just be of value to people. Versus
Yeah.
when you sit in your corner and cry and like, blame yourself for all the things you're doing wrong,
It's not a
it's
very good
not
motivator.
useful for
It's not a
anyone.
good motivator at all, right? To
No.
feel crappy. And frankly, feeling crappy is not your intended state. You're intended to feel really freaking amazing, actually. And so when you're feeling anything that's not from coming from a place of love, so I think that most of us have a pretty good understanding of what feelings of love feel like. It might feel like peace. It might feel like happiness. It might feel like bliss. It could be a wide range. But those feelings that come from a place of love, that's our intended state. Our intended state is we are love, essentially. And so when we start operating from fear-based places, worry, anxiety, shame, ruminating over what could have, should have been, we are creating for ourselves through those lines of thinking unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
So we are not meant to ruminate on, oh shit, I messed up and I should have done this differently. And oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. It quickly escalates. And that is our survival mechanism, ultimately trying to keep us safe in what is familiar. Now, what is familiar most of the time is probably not the most safe option, but it was safe at one point. So our survival mechanism has locked onto that. They're like, let's keep her safe in this category. We are not going to let her expand and grow without having some checks and balances. So when you start to recognize, okay, there's going to be some checks and balances, my body is probably going to be like, whoa,
Yeah.
but excitement and nervousness or fear can feel the same in the body. So really leaning into what that emotion is telling you versus the stories that you're telling can shift things quite quickly. Inside my book, I talk about the spiral stopper method. And ultimately, this is designed to stop the thinking spirals, those thoughts and those feeling thoughts that take us off into another land where we're completely incapacitated, we're suffering, we're overwhelmed, we're anxious. That's not a good place to be. And you deserve to be in a much better place. So ultimately, stopping the spiral is not about avoiding your emotions, because we actually need to feel them to heal them, for them to flow through. They're just temporary. They are meant to flow through. Now we bung that up by trying to resist them or by judging them and making ourselves have this whole spiral about them. So ultimately, the spiral stopper is about creating space so that you can consciously choose how to respond versus reacting out of that survival mode instinct.
Yeah, and you know what, it makes me think like the story of the emotions and identifying with them and all of this. I had this really big aha moment when this guy, I think he's a very like I forgot, Prince or something like that. He just talks very inspiring things, but through, it's almost like a poem. He's very like I forgot, but he said this: you think you're the clouds, but you're the sky. And when
Yeah.
you think you're the clouds and it's cloudy, you're in like doom and gloom. But if
Yeah.
you realize that you're the sky and the clouds actually pass through,
Yeah.
then it's much easier. And for me, that metaphor just changed how I looked at my emotions, especially because I struggled with anxiety for so long, for many, many years. And it was so intense to the point where I was literally curled up in bed and just, didn't know what I was going to do with myself.
I've
And
been there
it
too,
was
sister.
right. And it was just because I thought that's it, it's not going away. And it really does make you feel when you're depressed, when you're sad, when you're anxious, it makes you feel that it's not going to go away, that it's going to stay forever, or that it's going to kill you.
Ooh,
And
that's a
I
nasty
really,
spiral.
right?
Ugh. Yeah.
But what's beautiful, about like what we're talking about, we're different and we're bringing a different light.
Yeah.
We're bringing a different angle. Like we know what it's like to be there, but you can get out of it if we've done it. And I know, like I used to hear this thing with like, if I done it, you can do it too. I'm like, yeah, right. You don't know me, or you don't know my situation, or,
Hmm.
all of that. So I was arguing for my limitations so hard as
Oh
fun.
yeah.
We're hilarious. But It's
We're so
really
cute
true.
when we're human. Like, that's just the human way. It's again about this safety, right? But when you start to recognize that that safety is actually not for your highest and best, and in fact, that what was previously something that you incorporated for means of survival is actually keeping you stuck and small,
Yeah.
then reclaim your power and start to shift, right? Because you don't deserve to stay there. You're worthy as hell, like infinite worth, because you are, the way I view it is, you are the
Limitless.
universe having a human experience. Now, if
Agreed.
that's not divine and a miracle and infinitely worthy, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've come, to the same conclusion, but I'll tell you what, it took me many years to get there.
Yeah,
So if you find yourself, like, if you hear this podcast and you find yourself to where, like, I don't see that, I don't believe that, it's fine.
yeah,
I believe that we learn through our own experience. You might hear something once, you might hear it 10 times, and you might hear it 100 times
absolutely.
before it lands. Give yourself the time to welcome a new information, but I really do believe by us saying it is planting seeds for someone else.
Mhm.
And I know that I was there. I remember when I picked up Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth,
Mm. Yeah,
and
that's a
I
big one
was
for
just
me.
like anxious as hell. And I remember reading the book, opening the pages, and just like literally closed it back after like 2 pages. I couldn't handle what he was saying. I'm like, you dude, what planet are you on?
Yeah,
Fast forward a few years to like, I think the same way. I see the world the same way. I mean, I still have some growth. I don't think I'm at his
of
level,
course. Yeah.
but I do get what he's talking about, and it's such a different space. And it's just like, it's the place that you are talking about where like all the opportunities are at, where possibilities are something like normal. It's not, the whole like the world is small, only a few people can do it, only, the rich can get richer, or, all of that stuff. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I just think it's beautiful, and I really, really love all of the things that you shared. And I will really um, like to give you the opportunity to tell our guests where they can find you and connect with you to,
Yeah.
learn more about your work and what you're doing, and stay, up to date with everything that you're sharing with the world.
Yeah, I will say that you can find pretty much most everything about me, including my social media links, on my website at coachchristyholt.com. You can find the podcast, you can find the books, you can find other freebies that I have available. I have some really good resources for people pleasers. I have some really good resources for people who want to uplevel their relationships, even if they're already good, to a whole nother level. And I have a lot of different ways that you can work with me, both from online courses to unlimited one-to-one support. So there's tons of information there. And I just also want to just touch back on what you said and encourage people who maybe this is feeling a little out of reach for you. That's okay. All I would encourage you to do is try on the ideas temporarily, try it on, see if it fits, envision what that could mean as far as impact in your life. And if it doesn't fit, cool, take it off. There's no judgment or no shame here. It's just trying on new perspectives is what allows us to expand our awareness. And ultimately, to me, that's what awakening is. It's just an expanded awareness, a
Brilliant.
greater understanding. And as we evolve, right, then we start to hear and understand things differently, because not the thing hasn't changed, but we have. So we have a greater perspective. So, that's why the next time you read the same book over, you may understand it on a completely different
Different way.
level. And so, the first step is really just trying it on, giving it a go, seeing what would it look and feel like if I were to try on this new idea? What would it look and feel like if I were to believe I were already magnificently whole? How would I walk? How would I talk? What would I do? Who would I be? And then really start to act from that place. And you are going to absolutely see more magic happen the more that you can just remain open and curious with yourself.
I second that. I'll tell you, based on my experience and, that of my clients, I really do believe in exactly what you said.
Yeah.
And I have one last question that I always ask my guests at the end of the episode, and I would love to know, what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh gosh, like I said at the very beginning of the conversation, ultimately my mission is to spread happiness around the world. Now, it's not just because happiness is fun and light and easy, and it is, and we should aspire to have fun and play with this life, with this human experience in this meat suit. We should. But because happiness actually allows us to change the world from the inside out. This is, really shifting the entire world through shifting your inner world. And if you're not there on your journey, and that sounds crazy, again, I encourage you just to try it on and see if changing your perspectives does not absolutely revolutionize and completely change your experience of so many of the things around you. And so definitely my mission is to help people to really live the most amazing life, to create the most amazing relationships, and to leave the impact and legacy that they truly deserve and desire, because that's what we're here for. We're here for a purpose. The purpose is the experience. And so what does that experience look like for you? Not for anybody else, but for you.
I love that. And, I thank you so much. I do believe that everything that you shared here will contribute to a lot of people. And, I really suggest that you listen and re-listen to what, Christy said. It's a lot of, like, I took away, and I always say, I think I'm doing these podcasts, for selfish reasons, because I grow
I
and
say
I
the
learn
same.
so much. And I do believe that even our connections does, contribute to more happiness. I feel the joy of being in your presence and, learning from you. So I really want to thank you so much. And, can't wait to see what the future holds for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your platform. And yeah, I'm so grateful for the ability to share. And like I say, because that really gives permission to others to do the same. So if you're listening, get out there and share your story. You are definitely going to realize that you're not as alone as you may have thought. And that anxiety about that aloneness is actually causing you a great deal of unnecessary suffering, and you deserve to be completely free.
Amen. I love that.
Yeah.